I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. When the flood destroyed everything I owned, I showed up at my son's house with nothing but the clothes on my back. He looked at me through his expensive front door and said, "Mom, you're 67 years old. It's time you learned to handle your own problems." He didn't even let me inside. What he didn't know was that 8 years earlier he'd stolen over $2 million from me, and I was about to find out. The sound woke me just before dawn. Not rain, I'd lived through plenty of Tennessee storms. This was different. A rushing, angry noise that didn't belong in my small house on Oakwood Drive. I opened my eyes. The bedroom was still dark, but something felt wrong. I swung my legs out of bed, expecting the familiar softness of carpet under my feet. Instead, I felt cold water, ankle deep and rising. My 67-year-old brain couldn't process it at first. I just sat there on the edge of my bed, staring down at the dark water swirling around my bare feet. The Cumberland River was 3 blocks away. It had always been 3 blocks away, safe and distant. But severe Storm Debbie had dumped 3 days of rain on Clarksville, Tennessee. And that June morning, the river had finally said enough. I splashed to my feet, my heart hammering. The smell hit me, then mud, diesel fuel, and something organic and wrong. Through my bedroom window, I could see my neighbor's porch light reflecting off what looked like a lake where Oakwood Drive used to be. For a moment, I thought about Robert. My husband had loved this house. We'd bought it together 12 years ago after he retired from his engineering job. He'd spent hours renovating the kitchen, painting it the cheerful yellow I'd always wanted. "When I'm gone," he'd told me during those final weeks in the hospital, "you keep this place beautiful, Liv. Promise me." I'd promised. And now, 8 years after cancer took him, the house was drowning. I grabbed what I could. My hands were shaking, but my nursing training kicked in, assess, prioritize, act. I'd spent 35 years as a nurse. I knew how to function in a crisis. The metal box first. It sat on my closet shelf, the one Robert had insisted we keep for important documents. Inside my nursing license, Robert's death certificate, our marriage certificate, the deed to the house, a few precious photographs. Then clothes. I stuffed whatever I could reach into a garbage bag. My wedding ring was already on my finger. I never took it off. Robert's reading glasses were on the nightstand. I grabbed those too, though I'm not sure why. The water was up to my knees when I heard the bullhorn outside. "Evacuate immediately. This is a mandatory evacuation." I waded through my living room one last time. The yellow kitchen was already submerged. The couch where Robert and I used to watch Sunday football was floating. Our wedding photo on the wall was tilted water-lapping at the frame. I wanted to cry, but tears seemed pointless. After Robert died, I'd learned that nothing could truly destroy me anymore. Or so I thought. The emergency crew got me into a boat. A young man with kind eyes helped me climb in, taking my garbage bag and metal box. "Is there anyone we should call, ma'am?" I thought about James, my son, 35 years old, living in his big house on Governor's Square with his wife Melissa and their perfect life. "No," I said. "There's no one." 3 days later, I sat across from Karen Phillips in a cramped Red Cross office that smelled like instant coffee and institutional stress. The emergency shelter was full 30 displaced souls sleeping on cots, sharing 2 bathrooms, eating donated sandwiches. Karen looked tired. She'd probably had this conversation 100 times already. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Morgan," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Flood damage isn't covered under your basic homeowner's policy. You would have needed separate flood insurance." "But I've paid premiums for 12 years. My voice sounded hollow even to me. "I understand, but the policy is very clear." She slid a document across the desk. I could see the highlighted section, flood damage excluded. No insurance meant no money to rebuild. At 67, living off Social Security with $3,000 in savings, I couldn't start over alone. That evening, sitting on my cot with the metal box on my lap, I did something I hadn't done in 5 years. I called my son. James answered on the 3rd ring. Restaurant noise filled the background, expensive silverware, clinking murmured conversation, the kind of laughter that comes with good wine and better company. "Mom," he sounded surprised. We spoke maybe twice a year, usually on Christmas and his birthday. "Is everything okay?" The words stuck in my throat like broken glass. "James, I need help. The house is gone. I'm at the Red Cross shelter on Madison Street. I was hoping maybe I could stay with you and Melissa, just for a few weeks, until I figure things out. The silence that followed lasted only 5 seconds, but it felt like drowning all over again. "Mom," his voice had changed, gone flat, professional, like he was talking to a difficult client. "You know Melissa and I don't have space for house guests. We value our privacy. I wouldn't be any trouble. I could sleep on the couch. I'd pay rent as soon as I find work. Mom, I'm going to be honest because that's what family does." He cut me off smoothly. "You're 67 years old. Maybe it's time to think about whether you've made the right choices in life." I gripped the phone tighter. Around me, people were settling in for the night. A woman 2 cots over was crying quietly. "What do you mean?" "I mean you're living paycheck to paycheck in a flood zone with no savings, no backup plan. That's not bad luck, Mom. That's poor planning." "James, I worked for 37 years. I paid my bills. One natural disaster doesn't make me irresponsible." "Doesn't it?" His voice was cold now. "You chose to coast through life. Dad worked hard, saved money, made smart decisions. You just went along for the ride. Those are choices. They have consequences." My hand was shaking. "So you won't help me?" "I'm helping you by being honest. What you need isn't a handout. You need to take responsibility and improve your life. I can't bail out every poor decision you've ever made." I hung up without saying goodbye. That night, lying on a cot that smelled like bleach, listening to a stranger snoring 3 feet away, I stared at the ceiling tiles and tried to understand when my son had started to hate me. I didn't cry. Nurses learn early that tears change nothing, but something inside me shifted like a bone setting wrong that would never quite heal. The next morning, I stopped waiting for rescue. Dawn crept through the shelter windows, gray and indifferent. Around me, people stirred, parents trying to keep children quiet, elderly folks shuffling toward the bathroom, volunteers setting up breakfast in the corner. I was dressed and out the door by 7:30. The Tennessee Career Center smelled like photocopier toner and desperation. The woman at the desk looked up as I approached. Her name tag said Linda, career counselor. "Flood victim?" she asked gently. "Yes, ma'am." She pulled out a form. "What kind of work are you looking for?" "I was a nurse for 35 years, intensive care mostly, but..." I hesitated. "I lost my license renewal in the flood, and at 67 I don't think any hospital will hire me back." Linda's expression softened. She'd had this conversation before, too. "I understand. Let me see what we have." She scrolled through her computer for a long moment. "There's a custodial position at Mercy Medical Complex. Night shift 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., $900 a week. I'd spent 35 years saving lives in hospital hallways. Now I'd spend my last years mopping them. I'll take it." By the end of the week, I'd found a place to live. Tony Brennan showed me the studio apartment himself, 1 room above a dry cleaning shop on 3rd Street. The smell of chemical solvents seeped through the floor, and the single window looked out onto a brick wall. $650 a month, Tony said, not quite meeting my eyes. He was about James's age, probably felt bad renting this shoebox to an old lady. First and last month up front. I did the math. With my first paycheck, I could barely cover it. "I'll take it." That first night in my new home, I sat on the floor, I didn't have furniture yet, and unpacked my garbage bag. 3 pairs of pants, 4 shirts, underwear, socks. Robert's reading glasses, the metal box. I placed Robert's photograph on the windowsill. He was smiling in that picture, wearing his construction helmet, standing in front of the Davidson County Courthouse he'd helped design. We'd met when I was a nurse in the ER, and he'd come in after a construction accident. A beam had fallen and broken his collarbone. "You saved my life twice," he'd told me on our wedding night. "First in that hospital bed, then when you asked me to marry me." I'd laughed. "I didn't ask you. You asked me." "Details," he'd grinned. Now I sat alone on a bare floor, eating a gas station sandwich, listening to the dry cleaner's machines rumbling below me. "I'm going to be fine," I whispered to Robert's picture. "You watch. I'm going to be just fine." I almost believed it. My first shift at Mercy Medical Complex started at 10 p.m. on a Thursday. I arrived 15 minutes early, the way I always had when I worked here as a nurse. The building looked the same, that familiar brick facade, the emergency entrance where I'd rushed countless patients, the windows of the ICU on the 3rd floor where I'd spent so many nights fighting to save lives. Now I walked past all of it to the service entrance. My supervisor, a tired-looking woman named Sharon, handed me supplies. "You'll cover floors 2 through 4. Empty the trash mop, sanitize the bathrooms." Nothing fancy. You've done this kind of work before. No, ma'am, but I'm a quick learner. She studied me for a moment. You look familiar. Did you used to work here? A long time ago. By 2 a.m., my back ached and my hands were raw from the cleaning chemicals. I pushed my mop cart down the second-floor hallway, the same hallway where I'd once run code blues, where I'd held dying patients' hands, where I'd told families their loved ones were gone. Now I was invisible. Doctors walked past without seeing me. Nurses chatted nearby about their shifts, their voices full of the same exhaustion I remembered. Not one of them recognized me. I understood. I was wearing custodial coveralls now, not scrubs. My hair was gray instead of brown. I was 67 instead of 45. To them, I was just the cleaning lady. By 6 a.m., when my shift ended, I was so tired I could barely walk. I stepped outside into the pre-dawn cold, pulling my thin jacket tighter. The bus stop was 6 blocks away. I started walking. That's when I heard the voice. You the new night custodian? I turned out. An 18-wheeler was parked near the loading dock. Volunteer State Logistics painted on the side. A man leaned out of the cab, maybe 60 years old, gray hair, wearing a worn flannel shirt. That's me, I said. Henry Cooper. He gestured to the passenger seat. I deliver here every Thursday morning. Long walk after working all night. Hop in. I hesitated. My mother had taught me never to get into cars with strangers. But I was 67 years old, exhausted, and 6 blocks felt like 6 miles. I'm Olivia, I said, climbing up into the cab. The truck was clean and comfortable. A thermos of coffee sat in the cup holder. A photograph on the dashboard showed a smiling woman with kind eyes standing in front of the Grand Canyon. Where to? Henry asked. I gave him my address. He nodded and pulled out of the parking lot, handling the big rig with easy competence. Flood get you? He asked after a moment. Everything. Damn shame. He shook his head. Got family? The question hit harder than it should have. I thought about James, about that phone call, about the expensive restaurant noise in the background while he told me I'd made poor choices. Not really, I said quietly. Henry glanced at me, then back at the road. Yeah, I hear that. We drove in silence for a few minutes. Then he pointed to the photograph on his dashboard. That's Betty, my wife. She passed 3 years ago. Cancer took her fast. 6 months from diagnosis to gone. I'm sorry. I knew what that was like. My husband, too. 8 years now. Also cancer. Henry nodded slowly. Then you know. How it gets different but not easier. You just learn to carry it. When he pulled up outside my building, I reached for my purse. What do I owe you? Brother, if I charged everyone who needed a ride, I'd be the loneliest man alive. He smiled. See you next Thursday, Olivia. I climbed down from the cab. Thank you, Henry. Nothing to thank. We all need somebody sometimes. I watched his truck pull away, then climbed the stairs to my studio. Inside, I sat on my sleeping bag and looked at Robert's picture on the windowsill. For the first time since the flood, something in my chest felt a little lighter. Maybe I wasn't completely alone after all. The next Thursday, Henry was waiting when I finished my shift. And the Thursday after that. By the 4th week, I started bringing coffee in a thermos. Nothing fancy, just the cheap stuff from the gas station. Henry always accepted it like I'd given him something precious. You didn't have to do this, he'd say. I know. We talked about everything and nothing. He told me about his daughters in California, how they called every Sunday but never visited. I told him about my years in the ICU, about the patients I'd saved and the ones I couldn't. He talked about Betty's crossword puzzles, how she'd done one every morning with her coffee. I talked about Robert's blueprints, how he'd sketch building designs on napkins during dinner. She sounds special, Henry said one morning. She was, I replied. Then, he was. Henry smiled. You honor them by keeping going. One Thursday in late August, as we sat in his truck watching the sunrise paint the Tennessee hills orange and gold, Henry pulled 2 sandwiches from a cooler. Figured you might be hungry, he said, handing me one. It was just ham and cheese, but I almost cried. When was the last time someone had made me food James used to when he was little? Robert did on our anniversaries, but that was a long time ago. Thank you, I whispered. Nothing to thank, Henry said, echoing that first morning. That's what friends do. Friends. The word settled something in my chest. I had a friend. By September, Thursday mornings had become the highlight of my week. 20 minutes in Henry's truck, drinking coffee, eating sandwiches, talking or not talking, whatever felt right. You're good people, Olivia, Henry said one morning. So are you, Henry? World needs more of us, he said. Too many folks just looking out for themselves. I thought about James, about his expensive house and his expensive life, and how he'd looked at me through his front door like I was a stranger asking for spare change. Then I looked at Henry, this truck driver, with his worn flannel shirts, giving rides to an old cleaning lady, sharing his breakfast. The difference was stark. I'd been applying for better jobs since August. Day shift positions, part-time nursing work, anything that would let me sleep at night and pay a little more. I sent out applications to Morrison Manufacturing, Clarksville General Hospital, County Health Department, a dozen other places. The first week I heard nothing. The second week I started calling to follow up. That's when everything changed. Mrs. Morgan, the woman from Morrison Manufacturing, sounded uncomfortable. I'm afraid we've decided to go with another candidate. Oh, may I ask why? A pause. We received some concerning information about you. My stomach dropped. What kind of information? Reliability issues and... She hesitated. Substance abuse was mentioned. The words hit like a physical blow. Substance abuse, I don't drink. I haven't touched alcohol since my husband's funeral 8 years ago. Who told you this? I'm not at liberty to say. I'm sorry, Mrs. Morgan. I called Clarksville General next. Same story. We received information suggesting you might not be a good fit. County Health Department. Someone called with concerns about your dependability. 3 more applications, 3 more rejections, all with vague references to concerning information and reliability issues. Someone was sabotaging me. That Thursday morning I climbed into Henry's truck with my hands shaking. You all right? He asked, taking one look at my face. I told him everything. About the applications, the rejections, the accusations of drinking and unreliability. Henry's jaw tightened. His hands gripped the steering wheel harder. Who would do that? We both knew. That evening I called James. My hands were still shaking as I dialed. He answered on the first ring. Mom, what's up? Straight to the point. No, how are you? No, is everything okay? Just the impatient tone of a busy man who didn't want to be bothered. James, every job I've applied to has received calls saying I'm unreliable, that I have a drinking problem. Did you call them silence? Restaurant noise in the background again. He was always at expensive restaurants. Yes, he said finally. I did. The admission stunned me more than if he'd denied it. Why, James, I'm trying to work. I'm trying to survive. Because I'm helping you, Mom. His voice was calm, almost gentle, like he was explaining something to a child. Enabling your poor decisions isn't love. It's cruelty. You need to learn. Learn how to be homeless, how to starve. You're being dramatic. You have a job. You have a place to live. What you don't need is to coast into another situation where you can avoid taking real responsibility for your life. My throat was tight. What did I do, James? What did I do to make you hate me this much? I don't hate you. I'm trying to save you from yourself. That's tough love, Mom. Someone has to care enough to be honest. I hung up. 2 days later, my brother Paul called. I hadn't heard from him in months. He lived in Ohio with his wife and kids, busy with his own life. Liv, he said, sounding worried. James called me. He's concerned about you. He says you've been drinking, making up stories about him. Paul, I haven't touched alcohol. He played me a voicemail. Liv, you sounded bad. Slurring your words, saying things that didn't make sense. I felt cold. I never left him any voicemail. Then how did he have a recording of your voice? I didn't know, but the implications made my skin crawl. Over the next week, it got worse. I called my Aunt Linda in Florida. She didn't answer, but she texted James, told me about your problems. Get help, Olivia. We love you, but we can't enable you. I called my cousin Diane. She answered, but her voice was distant. Until you address your drinking, Olivia, I don't think we should talk. I'm not drinking. That's what people with problems say. Click. I stood in my studio apartment, phone in hand, and understood what James had done. He'd systematically isolated me from my entire family. Everyone I might have turned to for help now believed I was an alcoholic, a liar, someone unreliable and broken. But why? That was the question burning in my chest. Refusing to help me was one thing, but actively destroying me, turning my family against me, sabotaging my attempts to survive. Nobody went to that much trouble unless they were protecting something. That night I pulled out the metal box. I hadn't really looked through it since the flood just checked that everything was there. Now I opened it carefully on my floor. Robert's death certificate, dated November 14, 2016. Cause of death, lung cancer. Our marriage certificate, June 3, 1985. The house deed. Joint ownership, Robert and Olivia Morgan. Bank statements. But these were old from before Robert died. Our checking account, our savings. Nothing helpful. I dug deeper. At the bottom of the box, I found a folder I'd almost forgotten about. Robert had labeled it in his careful engineer's handwriting, important, Olivia. Inside were papers I hadn't looked at in years. Our wills, both of them. Life insurance policy information. A letter from Robert's lawyer about estate planning. I started reading. The life insurance policy was from Guarantee Life, dated 2010. Death benefit $600,000. Beneficiaries Olivia Morgan and James Morgan equally. I stared at that number. $600,000. Split between James and me. I'd never seen a penny of it. I kept reading. There was a note in Robert's handwriting dated a month before he died. Talk to Jim about estate. Everything in order. Liv will be taken care of. Jim. Robert had always called our son Jim, even though James preferred his full name. I pulled out my laptop, an old thing I'd salvaged from the flood. The screen cracked, but still working. Logged into my email. I knew what I was looking for now. October-November 2016. The weeks after Robert died. I'd been in Ohio then. My mother had been dying. She'd passed just 3 days after Robert. I'd been devastated, barely functional. James had insisted on handling everything for the funeral. "Mom, you just focus on Grandma," he'd said. "I'll take care of Dad. I'll handle all the arrangements." And I'd been grateful. So grateful to have such a caring son. I found the email dated November 16, 2016, 2 days after Robert died. Subject funeral authorization. Please sign ASAP, from James Morgan. To Olivia Morgan, Mom, attached is the authorization form for Dad's funeral arrangements. Just sign and send back ASAP so I can finalize everything with the funeral home. I'll handle all the details. Focus on Grandma. I love you. James. I remembered signing it. I'd printed it out at my mother's house, signed it with a shaking hand, scanned it, and sent it back. I was crying so hard I could barely see the screen. My husband had just died. My mother was dying. I'd trusted my son completely. The attachment Feelaname Funeral Authorization.pdf, I'd signed it without reading it. My hands were shaking now as I searched through my saved files. Did I still have a copy? I'd been using a different computer then, but maybe... Nothing. I called the funeral home the next morning. A cheerful woman answered. "Henderson Funeral Services. How may I help you?" "Hi, I'm Olivia Morgan. My husband Robert Morgan's funeral was held there in November 2016. I need information about the authorization forms I signed." "Let me pull up those records. November 2016. Ah, yes. Robert Morgan. I'm so sorry for your loss, ma'am." "Thank you. Can you tell me what forms I authorized?" Papers rustling. "It looks like we have a funeral service authorization signed by James Morgan as primary contact. The total cost was $8,500 paid in full by Mr. James Morgan on November 20th, 2016. $8,500, that was all the funeral cost. But James had told me it was expensive, that the medical bills and funeral had eaten up everything Robert left." "Thank you," I whispered, hanging up. I sat very still for a long moment. Then I picked up the phone again and called First Tennessee Bank. "I need information about my late husband's accounts," I told the customer service representative. "From 2016 and 2017. Account holder name, Robert Morgan. He died in November 2016. Clicking of keyboard keys. I show those accounts were closed in December 2016. Transfer of assets to James Morgan as authorized executor of the estate." My mouth went dry. "Executor, I thought we were co-executors." "Our records show sole executor, ma'am. But you would need to request official documentation for the specific details. There's a small fee." "Send it," I said. "Send everything you have." That night I couldn't sleep. I lay on my sleeping bag staring at the ceiling, doing math in my head. Life insurance, $600,000. Robert's savings account had about $425,000 the last time I looked. He'd been meticulous about saving. The house on Oakwood Drive had been worth at least $280,000 before the flood. Robert's 401k retirement account, he'd mentioned it, had over $600,000. His investment portfolio through Merrill Lynch around $180,000. I did the math 3 times, hoping I was wrong. Over $2 million. That's what Robert should have left. What he'd worked his whole life to build. What he'd intended to leave for me and James together. And I'd never seen any of it. At 6 a.m. on Thursday, when I climbed into Henry's truck, he took one look at my face and asked, "What happened?" I told him everything. About the email the funeral cost the bank accounts the math that didn't add up. About James's sabotage making more sense now. He wasn't just being cruel. He was making sure I stayed weak, isolated, unable to ask questions. Henry listened in silence. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "People don't go to that much trouble," he said finally, "unless they're protecting something big." He stole from me. The words felt strange in my mouth. My own son stole my husband's legacy. "You got proof?" "Not yet. Just pieces. Enough to know something's wrong, not enough to prove it." Henry started the truck. "Then we need to find proof. Because if you're right, Olivia," he trailed off. "What now?" "If you're right and James stole that much money, he's not going to let you expose him. He'll do whatever it takes to keep you quiet." A chill ran down my spine. "You think he'd hurt me?" "I think desperate people do desperate things." Henry's face was grim. "And right now you're the only person who can unravel what he's done." We drove in silence after that. When Henry dropped me off, he didn't say goodbye. Instead, he said, "Be careful, Olivia. Watch your back." I climbed the stairs to my studio, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. On my floor next to my sleeping bag was an envelope. It hadn't been there when I left. My hands were shaking as I picked it up. No return address. No stamp. Someone had slipped it under my door. Inside was a single piece of paper, printed in large block letters. "Stop asking questions, or you'll regret it." I stood there holding the note, my heart pounding. Someone had been in my building, had stood outside my door, had left this threat. James. It had to be James. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the note. Then I called Henry. "We need to move faster," I said when he answered. "He knows I'm onto him." "I'm on it," Henry said. "Give me a few days. I'll find out what he's hiding." I spent the rest of that day looking over my shoulder, jumping at every sound. That night I pushed my dresser in front of the door before trying to sleep. I'd thought losing my house was the worst thing that could happen to me. I was wrong. The worst thing was realizing my own son wanted to destroy me. And I still didn't know why Henry didn't waste time. The morning after I found the threatening note, he showed up at my studio at 7 a.m. with coffee and a plan. "I'm going to follow him," he said, settling into the one chair I owned. "Your son. I need to see what he's up to." I wrapped my hands around the coffee cup. They were still shaking. I hadn't slept. "Henry, you don't have to do this. This isn't your fight." "Yes, it is." His voice was firm. "When someone threatens a friend of mine, it becomes my fight. Besides," he pulled out his phone. "I've been doing research. Your son's company, Morgan Investment Solutions. It's not doing as well as it looks." He showed me a screenshot. Public business filings, the kind anyone could access. Morgan Investment Solutions had reported losses for 2 consecutive quarters in 2015 and 2016. "Right around the time your husband died," Henry said quietly. The timeline clicked into place. James's company failing. Robert dying with over $2 million in assets. James suddenly handling everything for me while I was grief-stricken and 1,000 miles away. "He was desperate," I whispered. "Desperate enough to steal from his own mother." Henry's jaw tightened. "Question is, what else was he desperate enough to do?" Over the next 2 weeks, Henry became my eyes and ears. He had a legitimate reason to be all over Clarksville. His delivery routes took him past James's office, his house, the places he frequented. A truck driver was invisible, just part of the landscape. Henry bought a small GPS tracker online. Nothing illegal, the kind of thing people use to keep tabs on their own vehicles or teenage drivers. One morning, while James was in a meeting, Henry attached it under his Mercedes's rear bumper. "Now we can see everywhere he goes," Henry said, showing me the app on his phone. A little blue dot representing James's car moving through Clarksville's streets. For 5 days, we watched. James went to his office, came home, went to the gym. Normal patterns, boring patterns. Then on day 6, something changed. "Olivia, look at this." Henry called me at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. He just drove to the industrial district. East Side near the old warehouses. I pulled up the app on my cracked laptop. The blue dot had stopped at a location labeled Industrial Self-Storage. He's at a storage facility, I said. Why would he need storage? He's got that huge house. People store things they don't want others to see, Henry said. I'm going to check it out tonight. See what unit he went to. Henry, be careful. Always am. That night, Henry drove to the storage facility. He didn't go inside too risky, too many cameras, but he watched from across the street using the zoom lens on his phone camera. At 8 p.m., James's Mercedes pulled in. Henry photographed him entering the facility, photographed which unit he opened number 237. James was inside for almost 20 minutes. When he came out, even through the grainy phone photo, I could see something was wrong. He leaned against his car, both hands pressed to his face. His shoulders were shaking. Whatever's in that unit, Henry told me later, showing me the photos. It's eating him alive. Good, I said. The word came out cold hard. Not like me at all. Henry looked at me with something like concern. Olivia, he stole everything, Henry. Everything Robert worked for. Everything Robert meant to leave me. And when I lost my home, when I had nothing, he turned me away. He's been sabotaging me, isolating me, threatening me. My voice cracked. I'm done being the victim. Henry nodded slowly. Then let's find out what he's hiding. But we didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, Henry was making his regular Thursday morning delivery to Mercy Medical Complex. I'd just finished my shift, was heading out to meet him, when I saw something that made my blood run cold. James's Mercedes was in the parking lot. At 6 a.m. He'd never come to the hospital before. I ducked behind a pillar watching. My son climbed out of his car, looking around nervously. He was dressed casually, jeans, a jacket. Not his usual expensive suit. 2 men emerged from a black sedan with tinted windows. They weren't the kind of men James usually associated with. One was built like a linebacker, thick and muscular. The other was lean and hard-looking, with the watchful eyes of someone who'd seen violence. I felt sick. Henry's truck was parked near the loading dock. I saw him in the driver's seat, watching the same scene I was. Our eyes met across the parking lot. He gave me a slight nod. Then he did something that probably saved our lives. Henry had a small audio recorder, the kind reporters use for interviews. He'd bought it after the threatening note appeared under my door, thinking we might need to document something. Now he activated it, slipped it into his jacket pocket, and walked toward the group. He didn't approach them directly. Too obvious. Instead, he walked to his truck's cargo area, making noise as he checked his delivery manifest. Just a truck driver doing his job. Close enough to hear. Invisible enough to be ignored. I watched from my hiding spot, my heart pounding so hard I thought they might hear it. The linebacker spoke first. His voice was gravelly professional. The voice of someone who made his living doing things other people didn't want to know about. What's the timeline? He asked James. James looked around nervously. It needs to happen soon. She's asking questions. If she starts digging into the past, if she finds out what I did. The old woman who works here? The lean man cut in. We've been watching her. Walks alone after her shift. Isolated. Easy target. My stomach lurched. They were talking about me. Planning something. Something terrible. Make it look random, James said. His voice was shaking, but he didn't stop. Mugging gone wrong. Old woman, wrong neighborhood, wrong time. Nobody will question it. What about the truck driver? The linebacker asked. We've seen him picking her up. He's becoming a complication. I thought I might vomit. James was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was colder. Handle him too, if necessary. Both of them. Make it look like they were both in the wrong place at the wrong time. Nothing connects back to me. The lean man named a price. James agreed without hesitation. They talked for another minute about details I couldn't hear. Then the 2 men got back in their sedan and drove away. James sat in his car for a long moment before leaving. Henry walked back to his truck, face pale. I ran over, climbed into the cab. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Please tell me you got that, I finally whispered. Henry held up the recorder, his hand shaking. Every word. We drove to a 24-hour diner on the edge of town. Neither of us could go home yet. We sat in a back booth, ordered coffee we wouldn't drink, and listened to the recording 3 times. My son's voice, calm and clear. Make it look random. Mugging gone wrong. Planning my murder like a business transaction. We have to go to this police, I said after the 3rd listen. Henry shook his head. Olivia, think about it. Your son is wealthy, respected, connected. You're a 67-year-old cleaning lady living in a studio above a dry cleaner. I'm just a truck driver. We walk into the police station with this recording. They have to listen. His lawyers will say he was joking, or that we edited the audio, or that it's taken out of context. Henry's voice was gentle but firm. We need more than this. We need to know why. What is he hiding that's worth killing for? Once we have the motive, then the police will listen. I knew he was right, but knowing my son wanted me dead and not being able to do anything about it immediately felt like drowning all over again. The storage unit, I said. Whatever he's hiding is in there. It has to be. Henry nodded. Then that's where we're going. When? Tonight. We can't wait any longer, Olivia. If those men are watching you, if they're planning to make their move... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I spent that day at the library not daring to go back to my studio. If someone was watching me, I needed to be around people. Safe. Visible. At 1 a.m., Henry picked me up 3 blocks from the library. We'd both dressed in dark clothes. I felt ridiculous like a character in a bad spy movie, but I was also terrified. You sure about this? Henry asked. No, but we're doing it anyway. We drove to industrial self-storage in silence. The facility was surrounded by a chain-link fence, but it wasn't high security. The single guard on duty was making his rounds on the opposite side of the property. Henry had brought a folding ladder from his truck. We set it against the back fence away from the entrance cameras. I went first, climbing carefully. I hadn't climbed a fence since I was a child. At 67, it felt both terrifying and absurd. Henry followed, bringing the ladder with us. We crouched in the shadows between the storage units, waiting for the guard to pass. Unit 237, Henry whispered. 3rd row halfway down. We moved quickly, staying low. The facility was dimly lit by orange security lights that cast everything in a sickly glow. Our footsteps echoed off the metal doors. Unit 237 had a heavy padlock. Henry pulled out a lockpick set he'd learned from a locksmith friend years ago, he told me. His hands were steady as he worked. 2 minutes later, the lock clicked open. The metal door rolled up with a soft screech that sounded like thunder in the quiet night. We both froze, listening. No alarm, no footsteps, no shouts. Henry pulled the door down behind us and switched on a small flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a space about 10 by 15 feet. Metal filing cabinets lined both walls. Cardboard boxes were stacked in the back. Everything was organized, labeled. James had always been meticulous. You take the cabinets, I'll check the boxes, Henry whispered. My hands were shaking as I pulled open the first drawer. Business records. Spreadsheets showing quarterly earnings for Morgan Investment Solutions. Tax returns. Corporation documents. Nothing useful. The second drawer was more of the same. Financial statements, investment portfolios for various clients, legal contracts. Then I opened the third drawer. A manila folder thick with papers labeled in careful block letters. Estate files. Robert Morgan, deceased, 2016. I pulled it out with trembling hands. Henry came over, shining the flashlight so I could see. The first document was a bank statement from First Tennessee Bank, dated November 2016. Robert's personal savings account. Balance $425,680. I stared at that number. $425,000. Money I'd never seen. Money James had told me didn't exist after the hospital bills and funeral costs. The next document was a life insurance policy from Guarantee Life. Policy number GL88473992, insured Robert Morgan. Death benefit $600,000 hounds. Beneficiaries Olivia Morgan 50%, James Morgan 50%, $600,000. Split equally between us. I'd never received a penny. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the papers. Henry steadied me, his hand on my shoulder. Keep going, he whispered. We need to see everything. Next came a property appraisal for our house on Oakwood Drive. Appraised value $280,000, dated 2016, before the flood. Then an investment portfolio statement from Merrill Lynch showing Robert's stocks and bonds. Total portfolio value $180, $340. Finally, a 401k retirement account statement from Robert's employer. Account balance $615 GD 20 hours. I did the math in my head, even though I'd already done it a dozen times over the past weeks. $425. $680 plus $600 $1,000 is $280 $1,000 plus $180 $340 plus $615 $220 equals $2 $101 $240 $2,100,240. That's what Robert had left. What he'd worked 35 years to build. What he'd meant to take care of me with after he was gone. And I'd been living in a studio apartment above a dry cleaner working night shifts as a janitor, choosing between food and electricity. Olivia, Henry's voice was tight. Look at this. He was holding another document. A legal form, notarized and official looking. Waiver of inheritance rights. State of Tennessee, County of Davidson once. Olivia Morgan, being of sound mind, do hereby waive all rights and claims to the estate of my late husband, Robert Morgan. I acknowledge that I have been adequately provided for and voluntarily relinquish any and all inheritance rights, allowing the estate to pass in full to James Morgan. Below it was a signature, my signature, or something that looked very much like it. I stared at that signature. The slant was right. The loops were right, but I had never seen this document before in my life. I didn't sign this, I whispered. I never signed this. Henry was already photographing it with his phone. Keep looking. There's got to be more. I found it in the next folder, an email printout. From James Morgan to Olivia Morgan, date November 16, 2016. Subject funeral authorization. Please sign attachment funeral authorization.pdf. But clipped behind it was another printout. The actual attachment metadata. Actual file name waiver of rights final.pdf, modified November 15, 2016, author James Morgan. He'd changed the file name. He'd sent me a waiver of inheritance rights and called it funeral authorization. And I'd been so grief-stricken, so destroyed by losing Robert and my mother in the same week that I'd signed it without reading it. My son had stolen over $2 million from me with one forged email. I sank down onto a cardboard box. The flashlight beam trembled in Henry's hand. That son of a... Henry started, but I held up my hand. There's more, I said, pulling out an envelope from the bottom of the folder. This is Robert's handwriting. My husband's careful engineer's script on the outside. For Olivia, to be opened after my death. Inside was a letter written on Robert's personal stationery dated 2 weeks before he died. My dearest Olivia, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm so sorry I couldn't stay longer. I wanted to grow old with you, to see grandchildren, to sit on that porch we always talked about building. But since I can't be there, I want you to know what I've left for you. I've worked hard all my life, Liv, and I saved every penny I could because I wanted you to be taken care of. I wanted you to never have to worry. Everything is yours, and James is equally. The house, the insurance, the savings, everything we built together. It's all detailed in my will and the trust documents with attorney Patricia Reeves. James will help you with the legal stuff. He's good with money and he loves you. Trust him to do right by you. Take care of yourself. Maybe travel like we always planned. Go to Italy, see the Amalfi Coast. Take Paul and Linda with you. Live. Don't just exist. James will make sure you're okay. He's a good son. I'm proud of the man he's become. All my love always and forever, Robe. I read the letter 3 times. Each word was a knife in my heart. He's a good son. I'm proud of the man he's become. Robert had trusted James completely, had believed our son would take care of me, would honor his father's wishes. Instead, James had stolen everything, had left me with nothing, had watched me lose my home and turned me away. And now he'd hired men to kill me to keep his secret safe. The tears came then. Not the quiet, dignified tears I'd cried at Robert's funeral. These were ugly, gasping sobs that shook my whole body. Henry knelt beside me, put his arm around my shoulders, and let me cry. I'm sorry, I finally managed. I'm sorry I... Don't you dare apologize. Henry's voice was fierce. You have every right to fall apart, but then you're going to get up because we're going to make this right. You hear me? We're going to make this right. I nodded, wiping my eyes. Henry was right. I could grieve later. Right now, we needed evidence. We spent the next hour photographing everything. Every bank statement, every document, every piece of paper in that filing cabinet. Henry's phone was filled with hundreds of images. In the back of the unit, I found more boxes, financial records from 2015 and 2016. And here finally was the answer to why. James hadn't just been doing badly in 2015 and 2016. He'd been drowning. Notice of default. Commercial loan amount. Due $1,200,000 and creditor. First State Bank summons to appear. Civil suit, Plaintiff Riverside Investment Group. Amount claimed $400,000. Cause failure to repay personal loan. Final notice. Tax lien. Tennessee Department of Revenue amount. Owed $180,000. The documents painted a clear picture. In 2015, James had taken out massive loans to keep his company afloat. By 2016, he was being sued, threatened with foreclosure, drowning in debt. Total amount owed approximately $1.8 million. Then Robert died, leaving over $2 million. James must have seen it as divine intervention, a way out. All he had to do was trick his grieving mother into signing away her rights. And it had worked. Using Robert's money, James had paid off his debts, saved his company, bought his big house. He'd built his successful life on the ashes of his father's legacy and his mother's future. "We have enough," Henry said, checking his phone. "It's 2:45 a.m. We need to leave before the guard makes another round." We carefully put everything back the way we found it, locked the unit, climbed back over the fence with our ladder. By 3 a.m., we were back in Henry's truck driving through the empty streets of Clarksville. "What now?" I asked. "Now we make copies of everything and send them somewhere safe," Henry said. "Then we give James one chance to do the right thing. And if he doesn't, then we go to the FBI. This is fraud, forgery, theft, all federal crimes since it involved life insurance and crossed state lines. They'll listen to us with this evidence." We drove to a 24-hour copy shop, made multiple sets of all the photos. Henry mailed one set to his daughter in California with instructions not to open it unless something happened to us. I mailed another to attorney Patricia Reeves Roberts' old lawyer with a note, "Only open if Olivia Morgan or Henry Cooper dies or disappears." By the time the sun came up, we'd created a safety net. If James made good on his threat, the evidence would still surface. "I need to talk to him," I said as Henry drove me back to my studio. "Face to face. I need to look him in the eye and give him a chance to make this right." "Are you sure?" "He's still my son, Henry. Even after everything, I need to give him one chance." Henry nodded slowly. "Then we do it public. Somewhere with witnesses. Somewhere safe." "Riverside Country Club," I said. "James is a member there. Lots of people around, and—" I thought of something. "Robert and I donated furniture to that club years ago. Chairs James helped me build when he was 12. Maybe seeing them will remind him of who he used to be." "All right," Henry pulled up outside my building. "You call him. Set it up. But I'll be there, Olivia. Outside in the parking lot. Phone ready to call 911. You're not facing him alone." I climbed out of the truck, then turned back. "Henry, thank you. For everything. For believing me. For helping me. For being my friend." Henry smiled, but his eyes were sad. "That's what family does. And like I said before, family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's who shows up when you need them." I went upstairs to my studio, sat on my sleeping bag, and pulled out my phone. My hands were steady now. The fear was gone, burned away by righteous anger and the weight of evidence in my bag. I called James. He answered on the second ring, sounding groggy. "Mom, it's 7 a.m. What's wrong?" "We need to talk, James. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Riverside Country Club, the private dining room." A pause. "What's this about It's about your father. And what you did." Silence. A long, heavy silence. "I'll be there," he finally said. I hung up and looked at Robert's photo on my windowsill. "I'm going to get justice for you," I whispered. "I promise. Tomorrow I would face my son. Tomorrow I would give him one chance to save his soul. And if he didn't take it, I would destroy the life he'd built on my stolen inheritance." I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Tomorrow I would sit across from my son and confront him with evidence of his betrayal. Part of me still hoped there was an explanation, some misunderstanding that would make sense of everything. But I knew better. The documents didn't lie. The recordings didn't lie. James had stolen over $2 million and was now planning to have me killed to cover it up. At 9 a.m., I dressed in the best clothes I owned, a simple blue dress I'd worn to Robert's funeral 8 years ago. It still fit, though it was a bit loose now. I'd lost weight living on my meager salary, choosing between food and rent. I looked at myself in the mirror above my bathroom sink. An old woman looked back. Gray hairlines around her eyes, hands worn from hard work and harsh cleaning chemicals. But my eyes were clear, determined. I wasn't that scared woman who'd called her son from a Red Cross shelter. Not anymore. Henry picked me up at 9:30. He'd dressed nicely, 2 pressed khakis, a clean button-down shirt. "Remember," he said as we drove toward Riverside Country Club, "I'll be in the parking lot the whole time, phone in hand. You feel threatened, you text me the word help, and I'm calling the police immediately." "I will. And Olivia," he looked at me seriously, "don't let him manipulate you. He's had years of practice. He'll try to make you feel guilty like you're the one doing something wrong. Don't fall for it." I nodded, but I was already thinking about 12-year-old James, his small hands gripping sandpaper, his face serious with concentration as we built those chairs together. "Am I doing this right, Mom?" "Perfect, sweetheart. You're doing perfect." When had that boy turned into the man who could plan his own mother's murder? Riverside Country Club sat on a hill overlooking the Cumberland River, the same river that had destroyed my house. I'd been here dozens of times over the years. Robert had known many of the members through his engineering work. The hostess recognized me. "Mrs. Morgan, we haven't seen you in ages. How are you?" "I'm well, thank you. I have a reservation for the private dining room at 10. "Of course. Right this way." She led me through the main dining area. I saw them then, the oak chairs Robert and I had donated 15 years ago. The same design James had helped us build. Simple, sturdy, honest craftsmanship. A memory hit me like a wave, James at 12 holding up the first chair we'd completed together. "Look, Dad, we made something that'll last forever." Robert had hugged him. "Just like I'm raising a son who'll do right by his family forever." I had to stop walking for a moment, blinking back tears. The private dining room was small but elegant. Windows overlooked the river. I sat facing the door, my large manila envelope on the table in front of me. At exactly 10 a.m., James walked in. He was dressed in a navy suit that probably cost more than 2 months of my rent. His Rolex caught the morning light. He looked successful, confident every inch the respected investment manager. He also looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes. "Mom," he sat down across from me, glancing at the envelope. "I'm glad you called. Maybe we can finally have a reasonable conversation about your situation. Tell me about your father's estate, James." He stopped mid-sentence, blinked. Your father's estate. Tell me about it." A slight tension in his jaw. "We've been through this, Mom. The hospital bills, the funeral costs, there really wasn't anything left after everything was paid." I said nothing, just opened the envelope and pulled out the first document, laid it on the table between us. Bank statement. First Tennessee Bank, Robert Morgan, personal savings balance, $425,680. James's face went pale. He stared at the statement like it was a poisonous snake. Where did you get that?" I laid down the next document. Life insurance policy. Guarantee life death benefit, $600,000. Then the next, property appraisal. Oakwood Drive value, $280,000. And the next, investment portfolio. Merrill Lynch, total value, $180, $340. Finally, the 401k statement. Retirement account balance, $615, $200, $2,100,240, I said quietly. "That's what your father left us, James. Together. Equally." James's hands were gripping the edge of the table. "Mom, listen." "No." My voice was calm. Cold. "You listen. I listened to you when you told me I'd made poor choices. I listened when you turned me away from your door. I listened when you sabotaged my job applications and turned my family against me. Now you're going to listen to me." I pulled out the waiver of inheritance rights, the forged signature, the email with the changed file name. "You sent me this email the day after your father died. I was in Ohio watching my mother die. I was destroyed, James, broken, and you took advantage of that. You told me it was funeral authorization, but it was really a waiver of my inheritance rights." James opened his mouth, but no words came out. "I signed it without reading it because I trusted you, because you were my son, because your father's last words were about how proud he was of the man you'd become." My voice cracked, but I pushed on. "He trusted you too. He believed you'd take care of me." I laid down Robert's letter, watched James's eyes scan the familiar handwriting. He's a good son. I'm proud of the man he's become. For a moment, just a moment, I saw something flicker across James's face. Shame, regret. It was gone too quickly to tell. Mom, you don't understand the pressure I was under. Then help me understand. I leaned forward. Because I found these too. I put down the loan default notices, the lawsuit summons, the tax liens, all the evidence of his financial desperation in 2015 and 2016. You were drowning, I said. $1,800,000 in debt. Your company was failing. You were being sued. And then Dad died and suddenly there was $2 million. A way out. All you had to do was trick your grieving mother. James's facade was cracking. His hands were shaking. You don't know what it was like. Melissa wanted the life I'd promised her. The house, the cars, the lifestyle. I was going to lose everything. The company, my reputation, my marriage. So you stole from me instead. I kept my voice level, but inside I was screaming. You took everything your father worked for, everything he meant to leave us both. You used it to save yourself. I was going to pay you back. James's voice rose. I was going to build the company back up and pay you back eventually. Eventually, James, I lost my home in a flood 8 months ago. I called you. I begged you for help. Do you remember what you told me? He looked away. You told me I was 67 years old and it was time I learned to handle my own problems. You didn't let me inside your house that was bought with my money, with money your father left for both of us. I was trying to teach you responsibility. No, I cut him off. You were keeping me desperate, keeping me weak, because you were terrified I'd start asking questions about the estate, so you sabotaged my job applications. You told my family I was an alcoholic. You isolated me completely. And when I started digging anyway, I pulled out my phone, pulled up the photo of the threatening note that had been slipped under my door. When I kept asking questions, I continued, you decided to eliminate the problem, eliminate me. James's face went white. What are you talking about? I pulled out my final piece of evidence, a printed transcript of the recording Henry had made. I didn't play the audio, we were in a public place, but I let James read the words. His own voice transcribed, make it look random, mugging gone wrong, old woman wrong neighborhood wrong time. The linebacker's voice. What about the truck driver? James's response. Handle him too if necessary. Both of them. James stared at the transcript. All the color had drained from his face. I wasn't going to actually. Yes, you were. I gathered the papers back into the envelope. You hired someone to kill me, James, and my friend Henry, because we were getting too close to the truth. For a long moment, James just sat there. Then he put his face in his hands. I panicked, he whispered. You were asking about the estate. I thought if anyone found out what I'd done, I'd lose everything. The company, the house, Melissa. I'd go to jail. I panicked. So you decided murder was the solution. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was desperate. You're always desperate, aren't you, James? I stood up. Well, I'm giving you one chance. One chance to do the right thing. James looked up at me, his eyes red. You have 48 hours, I said. Return everything. The full $2 million plus 8 years of interest at standard rates, plus compensation for what you've put me through. Let's call it $3 million total. Mom, I don't have $3 million. Then sell the house. Liquidate your assets. Take out a loan. I don't care how you do it. But if that money isn't in my account in 48 hours, I pulled out a business card. FBI Special Agent Sarah Mitchell, White Collar Crimes Division. I'd called her yesterday, told her I might have information about a major fraud case. I laid the card on the table. Every piece of evidence I have goes to her. The forged documents, the recordings of you planning my murder, all of it. And James. These are federal crimes. Wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy to commit murder. You'll lose everything anyway, but you'll also lose your freedom. James stared at the FBI card like it might bite him. If you do the right thing now, I said quietly, if you return what you stole, I'll walk away. We'll never speak again. You'll have destroyed our relationship forever. But maybe, just maybe, you'll save your soul. I picked up my envelope and walked to the door. Then I turned back. James was still sitting there, surrounded by the evidence of his crimes. Behind him through the window I could see those oak chairs, the ones we'd built together when he was 12, when he was still my son, when I still believed he'd grow up to be a good man. Your father would be ashamed of you, I said. The words hurt me more than they hurt him, I think. And so am I. I walked out. Henry was waiting in the parking lot just like he'd promised. I climbed into his truck and for a moment I couldn't speak. "How'd it go?" he asked gently. I gave him 48 hours. "Think he'll take the deal?" I looked back at the country club. Through the window I could see James still sitting at the table, his head in his hands. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I want to believe there's still some good in him, that he'll do the right thing. But I've been wrong about him before." Henry started the truck. "Then we prepare for the worst and hope for the best." We drove to a motel on the outskirts of Clarksville. I couldn't go back to my studio if James didn't take the deal. If those men were still watching, it wasn't safe. The next 48 hours were the longest of my life. I sat in that motel room checking my bank account obsessively, jumping at every sound. Hour 24, nothing. Hour 30, my phone rang. James. "Mom, please. I need more time. The lawyer's the liquidation process. It's not that simple. You have 12 hours left, James." "Mom, I'm trying." I hung up. Hour 42, still nothing in my account. Hour 46, Henry knocked on my door. "Olivia, we've got a problem." He showed me his phone. A black SUV had been parked outside my studio for the past 6 hours. 3 men inside. James had made his choice. At hour 48, I made mine. Henry and I drove straight to the FBI field office in Nashville. We didn't call ahead. We didn't make an appointment. We just walked through the front door, carrying our envelope full of evidence. "I need to report a major fraud," I told the receptionist, "and a conspiracy to commit murder." 30 minutes later, I was sitting across from Special Agent Sarah Mitchell in an interview room. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Start from the beginning, Mrs. Morgan," she said, turning on her recorder. "Tell me everything." So I did. I told her about the flood, about calling James, about his refusal to help. I told her about the threatening note, about Henry's recording, about the storage unit. I laid out every document, every piece of evidence, every detail of James's 8-year theft. Agent Mitchell listened without interrupting. When I finished, she sat back and looked at the evidence spread across the table. "Mrs. Morgan, you've done exceptional investigative work here," she said. "This is solid. The forged documents, the recordings, the financial trail. This is a prosecutable case." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we verify everything. We'll subpoena bank records, phone records, security footage from the storage facility. We'll interview witnesses. We'll build an airtight case." She looked at me seriously. "This will take time. Weeks, maybe months. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about 8 years of being lied to. 8 years of living like a pauper while my son spent my money. 8 months of sleeping on a floor, working night shifts, choosing between food and electricity. "I've waited this long," I said. "I can wait a little longer." Agent Mitchell nodded. "We'll also need to investigate the conspiracy to commit murder charge. That recording you have, we'll need the original, and we'll need to verify it hasn't been edited. Henry has it. The man who made the recording. He's in the waiting room." Over the next 3 days, the FBI moved fast. They interviewed Henry, verified his recording, pulled security footage from the hospital parking lot showing James meeting with the 2 men. They matched those men to known criminals. One had a record for assault, the other for armed robbery. On the 4th day, they moved. I wasn't there when they arrested James. Agent Mitchell called to tell me about it. "We executed search warrants on his home, his office, and storage unit 237 at 6 a.m. this morning," she said. "Mr. Morgan was taken into custody without incident." I sat down heavily on the motel bed. It was done. Really done. "The arraignment is tomorrow," Agent Mitchell continued. "You're welcome to attend if you'd like, though I should warn you it'll be covered by local media. Your son is a prominent businessman." "I'll be there," I said. The next day I sat in the back of the courtroom and watched my son, wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed, stand before a federal judge. The charges were read: wire fraud, mail fraud, forgery, elder abuse, conspiracy to commit murder. James's lawyer, an expensive-looking man in a suit that cost more than my car, argued for bail. The prosecutor argued he was a flight risk and a danger to witnesses. The judge set bail at $500,000. Melissa was in the courtroom. I saw her sitting in the front row crying quietly. When they led James away, she didn't look at me. She just left her shoulders shaking. Outside the courthouse, reporters tried to get my statement. Henry shielded me, helped me to his truck. "How do you feel?" one reporter shouted. I stopped. turned to face the cameras. "I feel sad," I said honestly. "That's my son. I gave birth to him, raised him, loved him. And he betrayed that love in the worst way possible. But I also feel resolved. Justice matters. Truth matters. And no one, no matter how much money they have or how successful they appear, is above the law." In the truck driving back to Clarksville, Henry asked, "You okay?" "No," I said. "But I will be." That night alone in my motel room, I finally let myself grieve. Not just for the money or the house or the years of struggle, but for my son. For the 12-year-old boy who'd built chairs with me. For the man I'd thought he'd become. For the relationship we'd never have again. The trial was 5 months away. Agent Mitchell said it was an open and shut case, but James's lawyers would fight every charge. I prepared myself for a long battle. But at least now, finally, I was fighting back. The 5 months between James's arrest and the trial were the strangest of my life. I was still working night shifts at Mercy Medical Complex, still living in my studio above the dry cleaner, still counting pennies. But everything felt different now. People knew. The local news had covered James's arrest extensively. "Prominent investment manager accused of defrauding elderly mother," read the headlines. Some people at the hospital recognized me, whispered pointed looked at me with pity or curiosity. Sharon, my supervisor, called me into her office 2 weeks after the arrest. "Olivia, I had no idea," she said gently. "About your son, about what you've been going through. If you need time off for the trial." "I need the work," I said. "I need to keep busy." She nodded, understanding. "The offer stands, whenever you need it." The prosecutors prepared me for trial. Agent Mitchell and Assistant U.S. Attorney David Richardson met with me weekly, going over my testimony, explaining what to expect. "James's defense team is going to try to discredit you," Richardson warned. He was in his 50s with gray hair and the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too many families destroyed by greed. "They'll paint you as confused elderly, possibly suffering from memory issues. They'll suggest the documents are fake, that you're making this up." "Let them try," I said. But privately I was terrified. What if the jury believed James instead of me? What if his expensive lawyers found some loophole, some technicality? Henry was my rock during those months. Every Thursday morning we still had our ritual coffee sandwiches conversation in his truck. But now we talked about the case, about strategy, about what came next. "What will you do?" Henry asked one morning. "After this is all over, whether you get the money back or not." I'd been thinking about that. I don't know. Part of me just wants to disappear. Move somewhere no one knows me. Start completely over. And the other part wants to use whatever money I get back to help people. Other elderly folks who've been taken advantage of. There are so many of us, Henry. So many people who trusted the wrong person. Henry smiled. That sounds like the Olivia I know. 3 weeks before trial, I received an unexpected visitor. I was coming home from my shift when I saw a woman sitting on the steps outside my building. She stood when she saw me, and I recognized her immediately. Melissa, James's wife. "Mrs. Morgan," her voice was shaky. "Please, I just need 5 minutes." I almost kept walking, but something in her face, the exhaustion, the pain, made me stop. 5 minutes, I said. We sat on those concrete steps in the early morning light. Melissa looked nothing like the polished woman I remembered from family dinners years ago. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. No makeup, jeans, and a wrinkled t-shirt. "I didn't know," she said immediately. "I swear to God, Mrs. Morgan, I didn't know what he'd done. The money, the fraud, any of it. I thought we'd just gotten lucky, that James's investments had paid off. Did you know he turned me away when I lost my house?" She looked down at her hands. "Yes, I knew that. And I'm ashamed that I didn't question it more. He told me you two had a complicated relationship, that you'd refused help before. I believed him." A tear rolled down her cheek. "I wanted to believe him." "Why are you here, Melissa?" "Because I'm leaving him, filing for divorce. And I wanted you to know that I'm cooperating fully with the prosecution. I've given them access to all our financial records, everything." She looked up at me. "And I wanted to tell you I'm sorry. I should have questioned things. I should have been a better daughter-in-law. I should have—" "Stop." I put my hand on hers. "James is responsible for James's choices, not you." Melissa nodded, wiping her eyes. "He asks about you, in jail." He keeps asking if you'll visit him. My stomach clenched. What do you tell him? That I don't know, that it's not up to me. She stood preparing to leave. For what it's worth, I think he's genuinely sorry now. Too late, I know, but he is. After she left, I sat on those steps for a long time thinking about James as a little boy, about teaching him to ride a bike, about his first day of school, about Robert's face when James graduated from college. I'm proud of the man he's become, Robert had written. If Robert could see him now sitting in a jail cell awaiting trial for defrauding his own mother, what would he think I never visited James before the trial? I couldn't. Every time I thought about it, I heard his voice. Make it look random. Mugging gone wrong. Some things couldn't be forgiven. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The trial began on a cold Monday in March. The federal courthouse in Nashville was an imposing building, all marble and authority. I walked up those steps with Henry beside me, reporters shouting questions we didn't answer. Inside the courtroom was packed. I recognized people from James's company colleagues' clients. His lawyers, a team of 4 expensive suits, sat at the defense table, papers spread out, confident and ready. James sat among them in a gray suit. Not the orange jumpsuit from the arraignment his lawyers had gotten him out on bail after Melissa posted their house as collateral. He looked thinner, older. When our eyes met across the courtroom, he quickly looked away. The prosecution's case was methodical and damning. Over 3 days, they presented every piece of evidence Henry and I had found, plus everything their investigation had uncovered. Bank records showing the $2.1 million in Robert's estate. The forged waiver of inheritance that I'd signed with handwriting experts, testifying that while the signature looked like mine, there were subtle differences indicating it had been digitally manipulated. Email forensics showing that the file James had sent me was indeed renamed from Waiver of Rights Final.pdf to Funeral Authorization.pdf. Robert's letter read aloud in court. Several jurors wiped their eyes when they heard James will help you. He's a good son. I'm proud of the man he's become. The financial records from 2015-2016 showing James's debts his desperation. And finally, the recording. The courtroom went completely silent as they played Henry's audio. James's voice clear and cold. Make it look random. Mugging gone wrong. I watched the jurors' faces, saw their expressions harden. On the 4th day, I took the stand. Assistant U.S. Attorney Richardson stood. Mrs. Morgan, please tell the court about June 2024. The flood. I took a breath. The Cumberland River flooded. I lost my home, everything I owned. I was staying at a Red Cross shelter. I called my son for help. And what did he say? He said I was 67 years old and it was time I learned to handle my own problems. He refused to let me stay with him. How did that make you feel? Confused, hurt. I didn't understand why my own child would turn me away when I had nothing. Richardson walked me through everything. The job sabotage, the family isolation, finding the evidence, the confrontation at Riverside Country Club. Then came cross-examination. James's lead attorney was a woman named Victoria Chen Sharp, aggressive, expensive. She stood and smiled at me like we were old friends. Mrs. Morgan, you're 67 years old, correct? Yes. And you've been under significant stress. Lost your home working a demanding night shift, financial struggles. That's a lot for anyone to handle, especially at your age. I saw where she was going. I'm handling it fine. Are you? Isn't it possible that in your stress and grief you've misunderstood certain things, misremembered events? No. You signed a legal document in 2016, a waiver of inheritance. Could it be that you simply forgot signing it? I signed what I thought was funeral authorization, not a waiver. But you did sign it. Your signature is on the document. A signature that was manipulated. Your experts confirmed that. She pivoted. Mrs. Morgan, isn't it true that you and your son have had a strained relationship for years? We grew distant after my husband died, yes. Distant enough that you might want to hurt him, punish him for not being the son you wanted. Richardson stood. Objection. Argumentative. Sustained, the judge said. But Victoria Chen had planted the seed. I could see some jurors looking at me differently now. No further questions, she said, sitting down. I stepped down from the witness stand on shaking legs. Henry gave me a small nod from the gallery. I'd done okay. Not great, but okay. The defense's case lasted 2 days. They called character witnesses who testified that James was a good man, a respected businessman, a pillar of the community. They brought in their own handwriting expert who suggested the signature could be genuine, that people's signatures change over time, especially under stress. They implied I was forgetful, confused, that my memory of events from 8 years ago couldn't be trusted. But they couldn't explain away the recording. They couldn't explain why James had met with known criminals. They couldn't explain the renamed PDF file. And they made a critical mistake. They put James on the stand. James's testimony began on day 7 of the trial. He wore a blue suit, looked humble and repentant. His lawyer led him through a carefully crafted narrative. "Mr. Morgan, did you love your father?" "Very much. He was my hero." "And did you intend to honor his wishes regarding his estate?" "Absolutely. I wanted to take care of my mother just like he asked." "So what happened?" James took a breath, and I saw him transform into the victim. "My mother was devastated when Dad died. Barely functional. I was trying to protect her from additional stress. I handled all the legal and financial matters. I may have made mistakes in the paperwork, but it was never intentional." "What about the audio recording where you appear to be planning your mother's death?" "I was approached by those men. They wanted money, said they'd hurt my mother if I didn't pay them. I was trying to negotiate to keep her safe. That recording is taken completely out of context. It was a lie, a smooth, practiced lie. But would the jury believe it?" Then came the cross-examination. Richardson stood slowly. "Mr. Morgan, you testified that you were trying to protect your mother from stress, correct?" "Yes." "Is that why you refused to help her when she lost her home in the flood?" James hesitated. I was practicing tough love, trying to help her become more independent." "Tough love. I see." Richardson pulled out a document. "Is this your signature on this lease agreement for your country club membership?" "Yes." "Dated September 2016, 3 months before your father's estate was settled. The annual membership fee is $15,000. How did you pay that when you testified you were deeply in debt?" I got a loan." "From whom?" "I don't recall." "You don't recall a $15,000 loan you got just months before your father died?" Richardson's voice was sharp. "Let me help your memory. You paid it in cash withdrawn from your father's savings account on September 28, 2016, 6 weeks before he died, while he was in hospice care." The courtroom stirred. James's face went red. "I had power of attorney to manage his medical care, not to pay for country club memberships." Richardson moved closer. "In fact, let's talk about everything you bought with your father's money after he died. The Mercedes, $85,000, the house, $450,000, designer furniture, $30,000, a boat, $70,000, all purchased between December 2016 and March 2017. I was investing in assets. While your mother lived in a house that needed repairs, while she rationed her blood pressure medication because she couldn't afford it, while she worked as a nurse for another year before retiring with almost nothing." James had no answer. "Let's talk about the recording," Richardson said. "You claim those men were extorting you, threatening your mother. Did you call the police?" "No, I." "Did you warn your mother she was in danger?" "I didn't want to scare her." "But you met with these men multiple times. We have surveillance footage showing 3 separate meetings. At no point did you contact law enforcement." "Why?" "I was trying to handle it myself. Or were you actually hiring them, paying them to make your mother disappear so she couldn't expose your fraud?" "No, I would never." "Then explain this." Richardson pulled out a bank record. "The day after your mother confronted you at Riverside Country Club, you withdrew $10,000 in cash. What was that for?" James was sweating now. "I don't remember." "You don't remember withdrawing $10,000 in cash, the same amount these men usually charge for their services, according to FBI testimony." The questioning went on for 2 more hours. By the end, James was completely broken, his story full of holes, his lies exposed. When he stepped down from the stand, he couldn't look at anyone. Closing arguments came the next day. Victoria Chen did her best. She painted James as a man who'd made mistakes but not crimes, who'd been overwhelmed by grief and responsibility, who'd never intended to hurt anyone. But Richardson's closing was devastating. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about trust. A father who trusted his son to honor his dying wishes, a mother who trusted her son to help her in her darkest hour, and a son who betrayed that trust in every possible way." He walked them through the evidence again, the forged documents, the stolen money, the lies, the conspiracy to commit murder. Robert Morgan worked for 35 years to build a legacy for his family. He died believing his son would take care of his wife. Instead, James Morgan stole that legacy. He stole $2.1 million. He left his mother homeless and desperate. And when she started asking questions, he tried to have her killed. Richardson paused, looking at each juror. This isn't a complicated case. The evidence is clear. The defendant's guilt is clear. Your job is to deliver justice for Olivia Morgan, for Robert Morgan's memory, and for every elderly person who's ever been taken advantage of by someone they trusted. Do the right thing. Find James Morgan guilty on all counts. The jury deliberated for 11 hours. I spent those hours in a witness room with Henry drinking bad coffee, barely speaking. Every time the door opened, my heart jumped. Finally, at 4:30 p.m. on day 9 of the trial, the bailiff came. They have a verdict. The courtroom filled quickly. James sat at the defense table, his face pale. Melissa sat in the back row alone. Our eyes met briefly. She gave me a small, sad nod. The jury filed in. None of them looked at James. That's a bad sign for the defense, I'd heard. The judge spoke. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman stood. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of wire fraud, how do you find guilty? James's shoulders slumped. On the charge of mail fraud, guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty. On the charge of elder abuse, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder. The foreman paused. This was the big one, the charge that would add decades to James's sentence. Guilty. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged her gavel. James put his face in his hands. His lawyers immediately began talking about appeals. I just sat there feeling empty, not victorious, not relieved, just empty. It was over. Sentencing came 2 months later. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Margaret Patterson. She'd been stern but fair throughout the trial. Now looking down at James from her bench, she spoke with controlled anger. Mr. Morgan, you committed a profound betrayal. You stole from your mother, a woman who gave you life, raised you, loved you. You stole your father's legacy. You left your mother destitute. And when she sought justice, you conspired to have her murdered. She paused. The prosecution has recommended 15 years. Your attorneys have asked for leniency, citing your remorse and cooperation. James stood. Your Honor, if I may speak. You may not. You had your chance to tell the truth. You chose to lie under oath. That opportunity has passed. She looked down at her papers. On the fraud charges, I sentence you to 8 years in federal prison. On the forgery charge, 2 years consecutive. On the elder abuse charge, 3 years consecutive. On the conspiracy to commit murder charge, 5 years consecutive. I did the math. 18 years total. Additionally, Judge Patterson continued, you are ordered to pay full restitution of $3.2 million to Olivia Morgan, representing the stolen principal interest and damages. All your assets will be liquidated to satisfy this judgment. She looked at James with something like pity. You had everything, Mr. Morgan. A successful business, a loving wife, and a mother who would have helped you if you'd only asked. Instead, you chose greed and deception. You'll have a long time to think about that choice. The gavel came down. Court is adjourned. They led James away in handcuffs. At the courtroom door, he turned and looked at me. Really looked at me for the first time since the trial began. His mouth formed 2 words. I'm sorry. I didn't respond. I just watched them take my son away. 6 months after sentencing, I stood on 50 acres of rolling Tennessee hills in Montgomery County. The morning sun painted everything gold. A spring-fed pond sparkled in the distance. Birds sang in the old oak trees. Henry stood beside me, holding blueprints. You sure about this? It's a lot of land for 2 old folks. I'm sure. With the restitution money, I'd bought this land. Paid cash. Built 2 houses, a main house for me and a smaller cabin for Henry, who'd retired from trucking. We'd also built a workshop big enough for all the woodworking projects I'd never had time for. The main house had a yellow kitchen, just like Robert would have wanted. Paul and Linda had visited last week, full of apologies I'd already forgiven. We should have questioned James more, Paul said. We should have trusted you. It's okay, I told him, and I meant it. Life was too short for grudges. I'd started a small foundation, the Robert Morgan Elder Justice Fund. It helped elderly people who'd been defrauded by family members, paid for lawyers, provided temporary housing. The cases came in steadily. Too many of them. Apparently what James did to me wasn't as uncommon as I'd thought. I was sitting on my porch one evening in late September when Henry brought over the mail. "You got a letter," he said quietly, "from James." I stared at the envelope. Federal prison return address. I hadn't spoken to my son since the trial, hadn't visited, hadn't written. "You don't have to read it," Henry said. "I know." But that night after Henry went back to his cabin, I opened it. "Dear Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. I'm writing because my therapist here says I need to take accountability to truly understand what I did. I destroyed everything Dad worked for. I destroyed your trust. I destroyed the man I could have been. When you came to me after the flood, desperate and homeless, I saw you as a threat instead of my mother. I saw questions I didn't want to answer instead of a person who needed help. The worst part is that Dad's letter was right. He did teach me to be a good man. You both did. I just chose not to be one. I'm not asking you to visit or write back. I just want you to know that I understand now. What I took from you wasn't just money. It was your security, your dignity, your faith in family. I can't give those back. I think about the chairs we built together. I remember being 12 asking if I was doing it right, and you saying I was perfect. I wish I'd stayed that kid who just wanted to make you proud. I'm sorry, Mom, for everything. For failing you and Dad. For being the son you deserve to disown. Take care of yourself. You deserve every bit of happiness that money can buy, and all the happiness it can't. Love, though I have no right to sign it that way, James. I sat on my porch for a long time after reading that letter, watching the sun set over my land. The next morning I wrote back. Just a short note. James, I got your letter. Thank you for the honesty, even if it came too late to change anything. I don't know if I can forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. What you did hurt me in ways that go beyond money. You made me doubt myself, my worth, my judgment. You took away 8 years I can never get back. But I want you to know something. I'm leaving the door open. Just a crack. I'm not walking through it today. Maybe not for years. But it's not locked. Your father loved you. He believed in you. I did too. The man you became isn't the man we raised, but maybe with time. With genuine change, you can find your way back to the person you were meant to be. Take care of yourself in there. I mean that. Mom, I mailed the letter but made no promises about writing again. Some wounds needed time. Maybe a lifetime. On my 70th birthday, Henry threw me a party. Neighbors from nearby farms came. Paul and Linda drove down from Ohio. Some folks from the Elder Justice Fund board. We gathered around a fire pit as the sun painted the hills gold and orange. Henry raised his glass. To Olivia. To new beginnings. To the family we choose. To home, I replied, looking around at these people who'd stood by me. Later, after everyone left, Henry and I sat by the pond. The stars were coming out bright and clear. You ever think about James? Henry asked gently. Every day, I admitted. I lost my son Henry. Money can't buy that back. No, but you found yourself again. That counts for something. I thought about the woman who'd called her son from a Red Cross shelter, desperate and broken. The woman who'd been turned away, sabotaged, threatened. That woman felt like a stranger now. I was a nurse for 35 years, I said. I saved a lot of lives, but I never knew how to save my own until I had to. Henry smiled. Betty used to say that life gives you what you need, not what you want. Smart woman. The smartest, second only to you. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars reflect in the pond. Somewhere across the property, an owl called. The night was cool, peaceful. Robert would be proud of you, Henry said finally. The way you fought back. The way you didn't let James destroy you. I hope so. I looked at Robert's photograph, which I'd brought out to the porch. I kept my promise to him. I didn't let the house stay destroyed. I built a new one. A better one. That you did. The foundation was helping 15 families now. Last week, we'd helped a 72-year-old woman whose daughter had stolen her Social Security checks for 3 years. Next month, we were funding a lawsuit for an elderly man whose son had forged a new will. Robert's money was doing good. That felt right. You know what I realized, I said to Henry. Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up, who stays, who fights for you when you can't fight for yourself. Damn right, Henry Sauer said. James was my son, but you're my brother, not by blood, but by choice, and that matters more." Henry's eyes were wet. "I'm honored to be your brother, Olivia." We sat there until the fire burned down to embers two old souls who'd found family in the least likely place, not in blood or obligation, but in the simple, profound act of showing up. And finally, after everything, I was home. This is my story. Every painful, surprising, heartbreaking moment of it. Looking back, I see how even in my darkest hours there was grace. When I had nothing, when my own son abandoned me, I found a stranger in a delivery truck who became the brother I never knew I needed. Don't be like I was. Don't sign documents without reading them carefully, even when they come from family. Don't assume blood guarantees loyalty. I learned that lesson the hardest way possible. But also know this: you are stronger than you think. At 67, broke and homeless, I thought my life was over. Instead, I fought back. I found justice. I built a new life. If you're going through something similar, if you've been betrayed by someone you trusted, please know you're not alone. There are resources. There are people who care. And there is a path forward even when you can't see it yet. Family isn't defined by DNA or last names. It's defined by who shows up when your world collapses, who drives you home at 6 a.m., who risks everything to help you find the truth. I lost a son to greed, but I gained a brother through kindness. I lost my house to a flood, but I built a home through perseverance. I lost 8 years to lies, but I found myself through truth. What would you do if you discovered your own child had betrayed you like this? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and justice? Share your story in the comments below. Let me know where you're watching from. Your support means everything. Thank you for following my journey, for staying until the end, for caring about an old woman's fight for justice. May you all find your own way home,